Are we teaching our children how to hate, how to discriminate, and how to bully? I ask this because of this video. In it, a 15-year-old Syrian refugee is being bullied viciously at his high school in the UK. He's choked, he's pushed to the ground, and then water is poured over his face by his classmates. It's a hard video to watch, but it's important that we do watch. And then ask ourselves, why is this happening? This case is now before the courts, so we can't show faces or name names, but here's what we know so far. It happened at Almondbury Community School in West Yorkshire. The teenager in the video was granted asylum with his family to the UK 2 years ago. They're from the Syrian city of Homs and escaped political persecution in 2010, just a year before the civil war broke out. They spent 6 years in Lebanon before finally being accepted into the UK to start their new life. But for this 15-year-old boy and his sister, school was a terrifying obstacle. They faced near constant harassment, physical and verbal abuse from their classmates. According to the family's lawyer, last month the boy was beaten so badly that he fractured his arm. That happened just a few days before this video took place, and you can still see the cast on his right arm. And then, in an interview with the BBC, the father of the boy said the attack left his son very tired psychologically. He says, because of what happened in the video, my son is shattered. He's not concentrating on his studies. When he's asleep, he wakes up saying they want to beat me up. And then just yesterday, a second video emerged, showing what looks like his younger sister herself being physically abused by some of her classmates.
Oh my God.
Both of these children are the only Syrians in their class. And that is significant because what's happening here on this small field in this small community has a lot to do with what's happening to the whole country. Since the UK voted to leave the EU in the mess that was Brexit, a vote largely won off the back of anti-immigrant hysteria, and the country has been in an especially dark place. Just last week, the government released its yearly hate crime statistics, and they're shocking. It found racially fueled attacks went up by 14%. It found religiously fueled attacks went up by 40%. 40%. And more than half of those targets are Muslims. And by hate crimes, this is what they mean. In March of this year, a man by the name of Paul Moore was convicted of attempted murder after he hit a Muslim woman with his car, and then ran her over, fracturing her pelvis and spine and leaving her confined to a bed. He then tried unsuccessfully to run over another 12-year-old Muslim girl, and when confronted, he said he was proud of himself. He'd done it to avenge terror attacks in London. That same month, an 18-year-old Egyptian girl, Maryam Mustafa, was beaten to death by a mob of 10 girls in central London. The British press ignored the story until the community made it go viral. Last year in June, a man named Darren Osborne drove his van into a group of worshippers outside a London mosque, killing 1 man and injuring 10. Police say he was in contact with far-right groups before carrying out the attack. This is a problem that is spiraling out of control. But it's not happening in a vacuum. It's being fueled by those who want to see this type of anti-immigrant hysteria spread. And one of the biggest culprits is this guy, Tommy Robinson. Tommy is a former football hooligan and former head of the EDL, the English Defence League, one of the largest and most vocal anti-Muslim groups in the country. Over the last few years, he's relentlessly campaigned against the Muslim community through media appearances, protests, books, and vlogs. He called the Quran a violent and cursed book, called Islam fascist and violent, and accused the Finsbury Mosque, the one attacked by Darren Osborne, of creating terrorists and radical jihadists and promoting hate and segregation. In 2011, he threatened the British Muslim community, ordinary Muslims, with retaliation from the EDL if any more terrorist attacks were to happen.
Every single Muslim watching this video on YouTube, you better understand that we have built a network from one end of this country to the other end. And the Islamic community will feel the full force of the English Defence League if we see any of our citizens killed, maimed or hurt on British soil ever again.
You know the 16-year-old bully from the video? Turns out he's a massive fan of Tommy Robinson's and shared several of his videos on his Facebook, most of them attacking Muslims. And while that kid's been charged and will appear in a youth court, what happens to those who inspired him? Like Robinson, or like Katie Hopkins, the far-right columnist who for years has been using her platform to stoke up anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant hate. In 2016, she tweeted, "Islam disgusts me," and a year later called for a final solution against Muslims in the wake of the Manchester Arena bombing. And we don't have to sway to the fringes either. Newspapers like the Daily Mail, the Daily Star, and the Sun are regularly accused of misleading and sensationalizing stories and framing almost every problem the UK has on immigrants and Muslims. There's establishment politicians like David Cameron, who in 2011 proclaimed that multiculturalism had failed, something that was echoed 4 years later by Angela Merkel. Fast forward to 2018, and a poll shows that nearly half the British public believes society is falling apart because of multiculturalism. I wonder where they got that idea. There's the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who compared Muslim women wearing the niqab to postal boxers and bank robbers, leading to a spike of attacks on, you guessed it, Muslim women. And then there's Hillary Clinton, who's not even from Europe, but still decided to come out last month and say this.
Hillary Clinton urging European leaders to curb immigration to halt the rise of right-wing populists. In an interview with the Guardian newspaper, Clinton commended European leaders like German Chancellor Angela Merkel for kindness toward migrants, but she said they need to send out a stronger message that they won't always be able to provide refuge.
Basically, the woman who used to be the US Secretary of State has finally broken her silence to tell all of us that you can stop anti-immigrant sentiment by stopping immigration. Really, Hillary? That's your hot take? The solution to racism is to give racists exactly what they want. This is the world that we live in now. Even those billed as progressives are appealing to the same xenophobic sentiments that they supposedly rallied against 2 years ago. What's changed? They realized something important. Fear wins you votes. Hate wins you votes. Last month, UKIP, the far-right party that basically spearheaded the Brexit campaign, announced that they were hiring Tommy Robinson as a special personal advisor to the head of their party, calling him an expert on Islam.
The reason I've teamed up with Tommy is that I want to talk about Islam. I want to learn and talk about Islam.
And Tommy Robinson is the man to do that with, in your mind?
Well, he is an expert.
This guy, the former head of UKIP, Malcolm Pearson, said part of the reason that he supports Tommy Robinson is because he has 1.6 million followers on Facebook. Go figure. So imagine growing up as a child in that kind of environment. How does that shape your view of the world, of immigrants, of Muslims? Well, we don't have to imagine, because we have the stats. In 2015, a YouGov poll found that 56% of the British public thinks that Islam is a threat to Western democracy. Not radical or extremist Islam, just Islam itself. That same year, a survey of 6,000 school children found that 30% of them believed that Islam was taking over the UK, and 60% of them believed that migrants and asylum seekers were taking jobs away from British people. On the anniversary of World War I, the war that tore Europe apart 100 years ago and led to the senseless death of millions and millions of people, French President Emmanuel Macron said something important. He said there's a type of nationalist leprosy alive in the heart of the continent that threatens to drag it back to the 1930s. We know what happened in the 1930s. Honestly, I am exhausted. I am tired of having this conversation again and again, of waking up to yet another innocent young person caught in the crossfire of this racial hysteria. It's painful to watch these events unfold over and over without any of the people responsible being held to account. And I'm not talking about a 16-year-old bully from West Yorkshire whose environment has taught him this kind of anger and this kind of hatred. I'm talking about his role models, the people that taught him that a Syrian refugee deserves to be degraded, attacked, and humiliated. And yes, it's heartening to see good people come out of the woodworks to support the victim, like those who raised more than £100,000 for the family. But this shouldn't be happening in the first place. Any decent society should be opening up its arms to those who come to it seeking refuge, those who come to it fleeing the worst violence and persecution that we can see on the face of the earth right now. Any decent society would fight anyone trying to spread mistrust and division among its people, not give him a platform in front of millions. Until the United Kingdom and Europe and all the rest of us take a really hard look at ourselves and decide what kind of example we want to be setting for our children. This is a problem that is not going to stop. This is a problem that is going to continue to spiral until it's out of anyone's control. It wouldn't be the first time. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode. This was super heavy. Clearly this is something that is very close to my heart and means a lot to me. And watching that video this week, as a lot of you probably did, it made me really angry and made me want to say something, because I think the situation that we find ourselves in is not sustainable. This is not something that I mean to be just focused on the UK. It's not a problem that is solely based in the UK. This is a problem that we all have, and how we're dealing with the worst migrant crisis since World War II, and how we're dealing with multiculturalism, with diversity, and with each other. And we really need to do better for our children's sake. Please give me your thoughts. I really want to know what you have to say on this topic. Do you agree with me at all, or do you think what I said was all nonsense and that there are things that I didn't talk about? Obviously, the UK has been going through a lot in terms of terror attacks, in terms of a lot of other factors, and that fuels a lot of these things. But the real culprits, the ones that are trying to divide people, are the ones that are using these huge, disastrous events and then framing them in a way that targets individuals, individual Muslims, individual refugees, individual migrants. And that is something that cannot continue. This was Buzz. My name is Mohamed. See you next week.